Beethoven wrote to a friend, "I am well aware of the value of my Fidelio. I know just as well that the symphony is my real element. When sounds ring in me, I always hear the full orchestra. I can ask anything of instrumentalists, but when writing for the voice, I must constantly ask, can that be sung?" On my first trip to Chile, I was making a film about Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and its global impact during times of political crisis and conflict. After traveling throughout the country, the crew and I ended up in the port city of Valparaíso, or Valpo as the locals call it. Built on hills overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Valpo is a city of murals. Some very good, some very bad, and with many thoughtless attacks of ugly graffiti competing for space with skilled artists. Valparaíso is a city with hundreds of painters, musicians, dock workers, hairdressers, dancers, and teachers. It was this city of Valpo that brought me back another 4 times to do a second film about Beethoven's only opera, Fidelio. The story of Leonora, who dresses as a man to enter the prison where her husband Florestan is being held by the tyrant Pizarro.
Very wet. Uy, sí, le sale vapor. I'm gonna jump to the... No, but... Okay.
Somebody sing why.
The sponsor. Like...
Right away, we had a big problem to solve. Where should we film the opera? We didn't have a space, and yet there was a rumor. An abandoned horse barn might be available, except there was junk and mud and standing water everywhere. The musicians, this gorgeous tribe of young players, didn't complain. The singers were game. Everyone was game. I was stunned at the generosity. I was 19 when the military general Augusto Pinochet staged a violent coup in Chile with help from the Nixon administration. Pinochet overthrew the democratically elected socialist government of Salvador Allende. The day Pinochet took power, army helicopters took off for every region of the country. This caravan of death, as it came to be called, flew to several cities to round up dissidents, to begin the arrests, the interrogations, the torture, and murder of those who might oppose or resist the dictatorship. The composer and conductor, Jorge Peña Hen, was one of the many who was arrested after the coup.
My mother always talked to me about him. He was like a magician, always creating all the time.
I was very close to my father, much close. I would never thought someone could do something wrong to my father.
I don't know, I don't understand why my grandfather had a so terrible death.
When he was killed, my life changed. I was like a tree without leaves.
Hola.
2 de aceituna, 2 de choclo. ¿Cuánto se demora más o menos?
I remember very clearly the moment that I decided to be an artist. It was in my school, kinder, 5 years old, I think. A teacher came and she told me, I'm gonna take you to your room. She opened the door and I saw all the other girls in the room dancing, jumping, running with ribbon of colors. And I saw those colors moving. Even I could tell you that I heard music watching the colors sound. It was magic. I saw magic on those colors and movements. So I saw that and I said, this is what I want to do. I didn't know that the name of that was theater.
I went again in search of Beethoven to put on parts of his opera for my film. And I found Maria Belén Espinosa Peña, a charismatic performer and a dancer in a Japanese art form, Buto, who has an unusual obsession with her dead grandfather, Jorge Peña Hen, a composer and conductor who had been murdered by the military right after the coup. But the odd part is this. Like the plot of Fidelio, she dresses like a man in her grandfather's conducting clothes to save him from being lost and forgotten without a trace. In her art, she recreates Maestro Peña's life, his conducting, his founding of a children's orchestra, his country during a time of military attack, his death, and his resurrection. She has been recreating Fidelio without knowing it, a cross-dressing rescuer of a man she has never met, who had been imprisoned, brutalized, and nearly erased from memory.
I feel that I have a mission in my life, and that mission is to be my grandfather. I say, grandfather, I'm here, take my body and come back to the earth. That's why Buto came to me. That's why it appeared in my life, to bring my grandfather here. When my mother told me the story about my grandfather, I was so little, I thought that Pinochet killed my grandfather with his own hands. I know who was Pinochet. I saw him on TV with little hair, white hair, hat, all the gray clothes. I had the image of him. I don't know why my grandfather had a so terrible death. This is a question that I still can't answer to myself. I'm trying to get the answer. The first part of my play is the transformation from my woman body to my grandfather's body. When I do makeup and when I get my hair and the costume and the music and I when start to call him, it's the moment that he can escape from prison. He deserves to keep doing what he had done and the people to know what he done, because he made so many wonderful things, and suddenly one day everything stopped.
I was in silence about my father around 10 years. I was very afraid, I was terrified. When someone asked me in any place, what is your father or who is your father? I said, oh, my father is on a trip, or I didn't say anything because we never know who was sitting beside us.
I need to think out the entire work again. This opera will bring me a martyr's crown.
Beethoven wanted to write an opera for various reasons. It was his way to master one genre at a time. So this is the deal. He writes this unwieldy opera, and the initial production went belly up. After the failure of the first version, they're saying, you've got to cut this and you've got to cut that, and listen, let's just cut this whole aria out. We've got to tighten it up, Ludwig, we got to do this. And he's saying, no, 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 I will not change one note.
Sterbe. Doch soll erst wissen, wer ihm sein Stolz und Herz erfleicht.
This is a story about a man who has been imprisoned for speaking out against the powers that be. He is put in a prison run by Pizarro, a tyrant, and stuck in the lowest dungeon to be starved to death. His wife has found out that he's there, and to try to get to him, she dresses up as a man and gets a job in the prison.
Sterbe. Doch soll erst wissen, wer ihm sein stolzes Herz erfleischt. Der Rache Dunkelzeit zerrissen. Siehe her, du hast mich nicht getäuscht. Pizarro, du stürzen wolltest. Pizarro, denn du fürchten solltest. sed non als Rächer, sed non als Rächer, als Rächer. Bizarr, wenn du stürzen wolltest, bizarr, wenn du fürsten solltest, steht nun als Rächer hier, als Rächer, steht nun als Rächer hier.
The Beethoven opera Fidelio, it's a story of this woman, Leonora, that she dressed like a man to save her husband that is in jail. So it's very similar to my play because I also dressed like a man to save my grandfather. It's repeating again this story.
Lo que estamos haciendo nosotros es planteando un nuevo enfoque de lo que debe ser el cultivo de la música, no lo voy a decir la enseñanza de la música, el cultivo de la música en Latinoamérica, el cultivo de la música en Latinoamérica, el cultivo de la música en Latinoamérica, de la música en Latinoamérica.
For Beethoven, 1806 began with a massive revision of Fidelio, which was then put on, was beginning to have some success, and then Beethoven got into a fight with the theater manager who he accused of cheating him and withdrew the score and screwed his own production. He was meanwhile passionately courting a countess who admired him as much as anybody on earth, but who was not going to marry him, partly because she was nobility and he wasn't, and secondly, he was Beethoven, you know. He was utterly self-involved. He was smelly, he was solipsistic, he had chronic diarrhea. I mean, you know, she was not stupid. So that was two enormous blows in a row, one creative and one romantic. And meanwhile, he was sick. He had fevers and headaches that went on for months. He had abscesses. He was physically just a wreck. And in that year, he did the revision of Fidelio. He wrote the revolutionary 3 Razumovsky quartets. He wrote most of the 4th Piano Concerto, obviously the greatest of all piano concertos. He wrote the Violin Concerto, arguably the greatest of all violin concertos, and the 4th Symphony, and some other stuff. It was the most productive and astounding year he ever had.
Sun is setting on this small town, a place that I call home. I discovered Beethoven by accident. I was 27 years old. I had borrowed a friend's car. I was driving from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara at sunset along Highway 1, along the Malibu coast. I was feeling melancholy, a deep sadness, in fact. At what, I don't remember, but my 20s seemed a melancholy decade. I pushed in the cassette in the player, not caring what it was. Out of bad speakers came some of the most sublime, most heavenly, most moving music I'd ever heard. It was the Adagio to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. By the time the final movement arrived, the famous Ode to Joy chorale, when the heavens are lit up with voices like fireworks, I had been converted. As the sun finally set into the Pacific Ocean, I knew I had to listen, read, get to know this man and his music, his time and his troubles. I had become a Beethoven's witness. Meeting Beethoven was an accident that would take me around the world and to Valparaiso, Chile. Fidelio. Never did my own music produce such an effect upon me. Even now, when I recall this work, it still costs me a tear.
Welchen Augenblick, Drache, werdest du, dich ruft in dein Geschick, in seinem Herzen fühlen. O Wonne, großes Glück, in seinem Herzen fühlen. O Wonne, großes Glück. Schon war ich nah ins Taube, im lauten Spott zum Raube. Dahin, ja dahin gestrebt zu sein. Nun ist es mir geworden, den Mörder selbst zu morden. Nun ist es mir geworden.
Hipólito Pedro Cortés Álvarez. Óscar Armando Cortés Cortés. Óscar Gastón Aedo Herrera. Carlos Enrique Alcayaga Varela. José Eduardo Araya González. Marcos Enrique Barrantes Alcayaga. Víctor Fernando Escobar Astudillo. Jorge Mario Jordán Domich. Manuel Marcarián Yamet. Jorge Ovidio Osorio Zamora. Mario Alberto Ramírez Sepúlveda. Roberto Guzmán Santa Cruz. Gabriel Gonzalo Vergara Muñoz. Jorge Washington Peña Gen.
Mensaje para el señor General Pinochet de parte del señor General Lee. El ataque aéreo tiene una leve demora. Será aproximadamente en 15 minutos más. Será aproximadamente en 15 minutos más. Tengo comprendido.
Ya, perfecto. Ataque aéreo a la moneda tiene una pequeña demora. En 15 minutos más será efecto a Tomás Mori y la moneda. Roger.
En la moneda han llamado por teléfono Flores, el exministro Flores. Segundo, el secretario del presidente. Manifestando su intención de salir con la fuerza de Morandó Occidental.
Qué bonito el weón. ¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué pasa, Floristán? Ven, ven con nosotros. Floristán se va a llamar. Ah, llegó Pizarro. ¿Qué pasa, Pizarro? Mina. In das liebe Frühlingstage.
Floristan's aria moves into light, but this time the light is purely in his mind.
Throughout his life, Beethoven was constantly falling in love with women above his station. Not that he thought so. In 1812, 2 years before reworking and staging Fidelio for the third and last time, Beethoven wrote passionate letters to the final great love of his life. His obvious desperation for a woman he could not have are known as the Immortal Beloved letters. He wrote, "My thoughts rush to you, my immortal beloved, now and then joyfully, then again sadly, waiting to know whether fate will hear our prayer. My life in Vienna at present is a miserable life. Your love has made me both the happiest and unhappiest of mortals. Oh God, why must one be separated from her who is so dear?" After the Immortal Beloved letters, Beethoven gave up the love, the peace he hoped would come with marriage. He would have none of what he thought essential for a happy life. Life is so lovely. But with me, it is poisoned forever.
My grandfather, he's taking care of my house. Always with a candle and a glass of water. My father came to my apartment and he saw it and he said, "Oh, why don't you stop living in peace?" It's not the first time he say that. Why don't you forget it? Maybe because it's my father, I didn't say much. Leave me do it. I don't. It wasn't a problem for me. I didn't fight. I didn't think about what to answer him. It was okay. You say that. I won't live in peace.
My house was always full of interesting people. Politics, intellectuals, musicians, many musicians from Chile and from the other countries. And my father was every day playing piano or writing music. My mother was pianist. I started to read music before books. At 4, I was playing piano, and then at 7, I began with the violin. I couldn't hear rock. He said rock is something that inspires bad things, violence and drugs. But I liked the Beatles so much. I was very fanatic, so that was terrible for him. Because my father he didn't accept another music, only classic music. When I was in the school, I was singing with a friend of mine, and we won first place in the festival. When we won that prize, we were invited to go to Argentina to sing, and my father said, no, absolutely no. That kind of people with that kind of music is not for you. If he would be more open in those things, I believe that I would follow the career and be a musician.
My father, the history of my father is a little bit sad. I was a man that lived a lot of time on the street, a boy of the street. He is like a gypsy, yeah, really. Yeah, my mother had a serious problem with alcohol when I was a child. And my father doesn't stay with us too much. I receive all the kindness of my uncles, my aunts. Maybe when I was child and I have all this problem with the family, I find out, I don't know, like a way to feel me freedom, and through the art. I always really loved the art since I was a boy, a little boy. I always loved singing. My father sings very, very good. They like to sing. My mother really doesn't like the music in general. But my father sing. I think that I take all my powers, my musical powers from my father. Till the end, I think that the art is only one thing. It's a way of expression. It's like a river. You can take a concert, you can take a painting, you can take a poem, but the way that you feel is the same. Connection between you feel and between they feel is like a communion. And I think that this communion is present in all the art.
When the dictatorship began, my father was arrested. He was arrested because he went to Cuba with the orchestra, with the Tillers Orchestra.
He went to Cuba with the children orchestra, and when he come back, they said that he was bringing guns inside of the case of the instruments.
Weapons in the children instruments boxes.
It was children. It's ridiculous. It's unbelievable.
He is a dangerous person, they said. So the soldiers began to look for my father, and my father was living in different houses.
They took them in the prison in La Serena. My mother tried to see him, but she couldn't. My grandfather's father, Thomas, he went to see him. He thought that it was just a mistake.
The night of the 12th of September, he wrote a very sad letter to us, to my mother, my brother, and me. And he was telling us he was afraid to be killed. He was thinking the end of his physical life was close.
October 16, Sergio Arellano Stark was sent by Pinochet. He arrived in La Serena airport, the helicopter. Caravana de la Muerte. They call it trámite. It's to fix some things. We have to kill people because we need to fix some things. There was the eyes was closed with a red, like this, closed. And they put them, my grandfather and more 14 people, put them in a car, in a Jeep. And they thought, oh my God, if they don't let me see, I don't think I'm gonna be free. I think I'm gonna be killed. They put them in the car, and they took them to the regiment, the military building named Arica, but in La Serena. And then they took them to the garden behind, inside, and they put all these 14 persons on the floor, looking down on the floor, one next to the other, and like a cross, everybody on the floor. They kicked them, and said one by one the last names, and they had to answer. Peña! Oh yeah, you, yeah, present, one by one. Don't move, if you move I kill you. And making questions about things that they didn't know because they didn't have any guilt. They weren't guilty of anything. And then they start to kill them, one by one, shoot them. My grandfather was killed in Pinochet dictator in 1973. 6 shoots in the back, one back of head, and one here.
Beethoven understood this question of imprisonment and torture, both as metaphor and reality. In Fidelio, he added a prisoner's chorus to testify on behalf of the damned, who are, momentarily, saved, released from their cells by Leonora. The numbers are not exact, but the repression in Pinochet's Chile was large in scale and brutal in its implementation. A majority of families had a relative, a friend, or an acquaintance touched by oppression in one form or another. To this day, individuals will not shop in a market that is owned by a Pinochet supporter, and they will cross the street to avoid looking into the face of that person. Chileans thought their society was too civilized, too law-abiding, too democratic for such barbarism. They were wrong.
Famous prisoners chorus where the prisoners are coming out into the sunlight and the music depicts coming from darkness into light and into pleasure for a moment because they're going to have to go back. Here's the thing about Beethoven. He was solipsistic. He was suspicious of everybody. He was ready to condemn his dearest friends for cheating him and for betraying him. But what moved him was suffering, no matter who it was. And somebody said once, he would be reaming you out one day and condemning you for cheating him. And if he heard the next day that you were in a bad way, he'd empty his pockets for you. I think he was somebody who didn't like people very much, but he devoted his life to humanity. But it was mainly human suffering that he was concerned with. And that always moved him. And that's a lot of what's behind Fidelio, of course.
Silencio, tengan cuidado, porque somos vigilados, porque somos vigilados. Silencio, silencio, tengan cuidado, silencio, tengan cuidado, silencio, tengan cuidado, atención, 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 tengan cuidado, silencio, tengan
We will now speak to each other in tones. Beethoven said these words to Dorothea von Erdmann, a dear friend and pianist who had lost her young child in March of 1804. Erdmann had been unhappy with him for not reaching out to her after her child's death. A few days later, he surprised her by showing up at her door. Beethoven entered and sat down at the piano, then spoke his one sentence. We will now speak to each other in tones. He improvised for an hour for his suffering friend at a moment of emotional emergency. Playing music for one who is troubled and in pain from one who is versed in the ways of trouble and pain. When he was done, he silently left. Dorothea von Erdmann wrote to a friend, Beethoven told me everything. I began to sob, and my grief found both expression and relief. I have been reading about and listening to Beethoven all of my adult life. His letters, recollections of friends, several biographies and specialized studies, the piano sonatas, the string quartets, the symphonies, and his only opera, Fidelio. My only conclusion from this effort, a simple enough conclusion, is that Beethoven was a profoundly sensitive human being who gave musical shape to our fears, our sorrows, our joys. His heart and ears, despite increasing deafness, were wide open to music, wrestling with the sounds he invented and accepting sounds that simply came his way, as if delivered like a gift without a return address. And yet this exchange with the suffering friend stood out from everything I had read. Beethoven had uttered no words for an hour of his playing, had remained silent except for the tones. He had played music at the service of healing and repair. Wordless, he had been countering depression and heartbreak and grief with the best way he could express his tenderness and compassion.
When I was a little child, my father told me, when you have 20 years, you won't have your father. And I started to cry. And he said, no, don't worry. I know that. I do know that. And my grandmother, his mother, she told us that my father always said that when he was young. Mom, I'm going to live until 45. And when we asked him, he always said, because I know that.
The essence of Fidelio is about how one single person, a woman, can bring down a tyrant, the individual hero, who by force of conviction and morality, moral energy can fight and succeed in bringing down tyranny.
Ich folgte meiner Triebe, ich wanke nicht, wie steinig, nicht den treuen Atemwege. Ich folgte meiner Triebe, ich wanke nicht, ich wanke
I was born with people singing Handel Messiah around me. When I was born, my father had all the people of the chorus hidden in a room, so then entered to the room where my mother was with the baby, and they were singing For Unto Us a Child is Born. Everybody said it was something very special, very beautiful. My father always did things like that. I loved him. He was a fantastic person, great person, very generous, funny, and he was very, very intelligent, brilliant person. When I was a child, I was a dreamer. I'm still a dreamer, I think. I wanted to climb it and to be in the top of the tree, dreaming about everything, because it was my favorite activity. And I to take the chirimoyas and to eat. And my mother, the maid, was every day calling me, hey, come and do your homeworks. Okay, I go later, but I never did. I never did it. Because we live in a house, wonderful, so old, with 3 kitchens. Can you imagine that? My father's father was the founder of the Socialist Party in Coquimbo, not in old Chile, in Coquimbo. So when my father was born, my grandfather signed him up in the Socialist Party as a member.
When he was a baby.
When my father was born, obvious he was a baby.
Yes.
And then the other one was from the right, my other grandfather. They represented the Cold War, absolutely. So I have the right and the left. But my father never was working in the Partido Socialista, never. They always offered my father and called my father, please. But he never wanted. He only loved the music. He only had time for the music.
There are weird, rickety ascensors in Valparaiso. From another century, they travel up and down what seems like dangerously old tracks, pulled by thick cables that I thought could and would snap at any moment, the moment that I got on one of these crazy things. They are like a bad carnival ride, ready to fling you down a hillside, tumbling over and over until you hit bottom. And yet they are beautiful. Seen from a distance, they look like red ladybugs climbing up a cliffside, Up close, they are as grimy and unpleasant as a New York subway car.
Okay, I'm gonna say it, but very light. I mean, well, I'm gonna see what get out from my mouth. When my grandfather was killed, he was separated from my grandmother. They were in different houses.
He didn't live with us, with my mother, I mean. I was living in Santiago because I was in the university when they separated. So I don't know anything. My parents separated about 4 or 3 months before my father was arrested.
I really don't. I don't know.
And when he was arrested, he wrote letters to my mother. I'm not sure he wrote to me. Well, my brother was in the Air Force. He wrote a letter to my mother asking for help because he knew some people in the left had been killed, and asked my mother to talk to an Air Force general who was a friend of him, but
all that I know are things that had been told to me. For example, my mother didn't have any possibility to help my grandfather to get out from the prison, but anyway, she tried to go to see him every day. She and her grandfather, so my grandfather's father, he went always to see him to the jail, I know that. And my mother also. My grandmother I think she never went to see him.
there were many bad feelings in that time, almost because Chile entire was divided and crazy.
I don't know what was the political position of my grandmother. My grandfather was socialist, and she was his wife, so she shouldn't be so much different. But it wasn't hard for her to believe the things that the newspapers said about dangerous people. Not specifically my grandfather, because it couldn't be a wife to believe that he brings guns from Cuba, her own husband. I think she didn't do anything because I think she didn't saw the real danger. That's what I want to think.
It was like a bomb that destroyed the family. It's a big tragedy.
In Fidelio, Beethoven created a fantasy lover in the brave and loyal Leonora, a courageous woman of perfect virtue and ethical clarity. She is honorable in ways that Beethoven could never be, as he was never expected to be. Leonora is heroic, willing to sacrifice her life for her husband, Florestan, ready to sacrifice her life to Beethoven himself.
When my grandfather was in prison, he was in a room very small, dark, without nothing. No chair, no bed, no bathroom, nothing. Like a dog. And he had a cigarette box and matches. So he took the paper of the box and he took matches, he lighted it, and then he waited and he started to write a melody. He was in a room dark. The only light that he had a little hole. A little light. And he found a little light to can see and start to write. He put this paper inside of a container. And my mom says one day she was in the house and her brother came to the house and he said, "I have a miracle." My mom says she took the paper and it has his smell, my grandfather's smell. And that paper for me was like a legend.
My brother said it smelled like that. He said that, and it was true. Many years later, I started to cry. Bueno.
You know, 20 years old, made by matches, it's hard to read it. It wasn't clear. But 2 years ago, when was 40 years from his killed, that paper was read and was played. And we listened it in a homage in La Serena. And it's so dramatic melody. It's so dramatic. Like a book story, like a movie. It's so poetic. It's so epic. It's so epic. The only moment to write was that. So I think that writing with a match in the dark, it's so extreme decision because it was the only chance to express what he was feeling.
A person that in a moment so dark, so terrible, so depressed, so alone, like that moment, to have the capacity to create music and to write with burned matches is incredible for me.
this operation. I don't like this operation. Oh! This is like a bad carnival ride. Bad. Really bad. Carnival. I spoke to an academic philosopher in Chile who told me that listening to some of Beethoven's music, the late string quartets, for example, hurts so much that he cannot listen to them. The pleasure and pain are so profound that to avoid them is wise, necessary. He can't expose himself to the music, let it take him over for fear of falling off the edge of the earth. His soul would be too tied up in a painful knot of contradictory feelings. What other word can we find for this exposure, this longing and retreat, than love and the fear of it? The pianist Glenn Gould thought of Beethoven as a museum curator and a mad inventor, artistically all over the place. That seems right. By accident, I invited myself into his musical museum, where I discovered his tenderness and fury, his fierce nobility and his deep and isolated grief. Often enough grief that he brought upon himself because he was committed to his music above all things. I've been following Beethoven and his creations for a while now. I'll keep at it for a while longer.